The taste of rain that night still lingers if I think about it. Metallic, biting, with each drop slipping down the collar of my threadbare coat as though trying to seep through to my bones. Manhattan's grey radiance reflected off wet pavement, bending in ripples around my boots. I had lingered outside the gallery for too long, hands jammed into my pockets, breathing in cold city darkness and jazz leaking quietly from a fifth-story window above. Most people drifting down 22nd Street barely glanced at the signboard, the one with my name spelled correctly but a little too small, Marcel Joyner Movement in the Modern Frame. On paper, it sounded important. To me, standing outside and shivering in defeat, it felt like a prank. Someone inside had called my exhibition an interesting experiment, their voice edged with polite disdain. Inside, wall projections looped the short films I'd poured every cent into, each one a plea for dance to exist not only on a stage, but inside a frame, in the messy in-between of motion and stillness. But in that gallery, white walls womb bright, floor polished virgin clean, people wandering with sculpturesque boredom, my ideas had found no harbor. I imagined my father's voice, Midwest vowels sharp, echoing across years, gallery. Dancers belong on Broadway if at all, he said gallery like it meant garbage truck. My uncle's laughter, teasing the way I bent my knees after dinner and spun quietly behind the refrigerator door. Look at Marcel making up ballet stories for the spoons. Even my mother, who never stopped me, never quite smiled when I talked about choreography. My family did not dance, my town did not dance. They certainly did not make art of it and heave it up for city strangers to contemplate. The rain grew heavier, beating steady against the awning, drowning the soft croon from above. I pressed my forehead against icy glass and watched as two women shrugged their black peacoats tighter, whispered behind cupped hands, and left. Someone inside straightened the fruit on the hors d'oeuvres tray for the third time. I had known rejection before, every earnest letter from home explaining my dream, every startled face during holidays when I said, I want to choreograph, not teach gym, not dance chorus. I want to create something that changes how people see movement, but this felt fuller. I pulled on the door and the handle slipped in my grip, slick with rain. For one foolish aching second, I almost didn't step inside at all. But I did. I walked among those strangers and their polite faces, each step conscious of the hush following me. I heard a man in glasses murmur, "It's ... esoteric, isn't it?" And a woman ask, "But is it dance if it's just on a screen?" As if I wasn't standing 4 feet away, clutching a program to my chest. No one looked at me with recognition. At the end of the night, Anna, my one champion, came over and squeezed my shoulder. "We'll get there," she said, as if cheering a losing boxer. Her certainty wavered just at the edge, and I almost laughed. On the subway, I pressed my head back and let the motion rock me, counting stops, watching my reflection flick by in the window, a gaunt young man with water-dark hair and shadows under his eyes. Was this the only story I'd ever live? The one where people either don't see you or don't want you to be seen. I did not call my family that night. I let my phone ring until it went quiet. The weeks after that passed in a strange hush. I worked lunch shifts at Lewis's trattoria, plates of rigatoni, too many orders of arancini, people in love and people alone. At night, I found corners in libraries or practiced in the undersized room I shared with a jazz guitarist with insomnia. Sometimes I'd wake and find John strumming softly at 4 a.m., and he'd give me a tired smile and nudge aside a pizza box for me to practice pliés on the squeaky wooden floor. I replayed the gallery night in my head for days, not because I wanted to, but because the human brain insists on prodding at sore places. Sometimes on break at the restaurant, I would see Anna's message from the morning after, "Don't let them define the work," and try deeply to believe it. But it was hard. My parents' worried emails began to multiply. "You're still young," my mother wrote. "You can always come home." I pictured my old bedroom in Niles, Ohio, all packed away with books turned yellow at the edges, and balked. Instead, I poured myself into physical work, training at the non-profit dance center after hours, running choreography workshops at a neighborhood school for almost nothing, letting hunger gnaw at me when rent bit harder than expected. The city didn't care if you were lonely. I moved through it silent and unseen, gathering resolve instead of bitterness for every time I was told, with varying degrees of kindness, that conceptual dance and digital art was too strange, too niche, too obvious, or too obscure. My father's voice haunted me. "What is there to show for all your moving around? Where's the job, Marcel?" Each rejection letter went into an old envelope creased with disappointment. I danced anyway. Choreography became my argument. If movement could be translated to other forms, if story could seep through without words, maybe even the doubters would feel it. It took 4 more years and every form of compromise. I taught when I had to teach, I temped at offices whose windows didn't open, I made short films and uploaded them, and watched the counters tick up from 3 views to 5 to 100, hoping, then not hoping. Then during one early spring, Anna called, giddy in the way she sounded as a freshman when hope was still an easy thing. "Marcel, you need to see this," she said, and sent a link to a grant competition sponsored by the City Art Council. It was for interdisciplinary artists. The prize was real money support, a chance to install and perform a brand new work at the Lincoln Movement Centers Atrium. The jury was a mix of hard-nosed city officials and sincere art nerds who cared about innovation, apparently. I entered with nothing to lose: old rehearsal videos, a proposal about movement as communication across differences, a bare-bones plan to translate gestures into light and shadow. The application felt like tossing a message in a bottle off the coast of nowhere. For weeks, no reply. Then Anna texted, "You're on the shortlist." I read the email 3 times before I allowed myself to believe. I called my mother. She sounded surprised I wasn't asking for money. "Well," she said, cautious, "if you win, let us know." I didn't let myself dream, but then another call, an offer. I got the grant. In the weeks that followed, I danced more than I slept. Anna helped build the digital installation, mapping dancers' tracked motion onto huge sheets of frosted acrylic. Friends from everywhere donated bits and time: graphic designers, sound artists, photographers. I moved through it all with a silent, surgical intensity. When doubt chewed at the edges, I'd remember shivering outside that gallery, rain pooling in my shoes, and push harder. The opening night felt half-imagined. City council members mingled with wiry teenagers and thick-necked grandfathers from the borough art collectives. 4 dancers, one in a wheelchair, 2 ex-ballet, one who'd never worn slippers, moved through the space, their layers of gesture fracturing into projected light, each action casting ripples and interleaving images. Music and city sounds braided in the atrium air, and the whole thing finally felt bigger than just me. A question, a heartbreak, a reminder to pay attention to the interim gestures between arrival and departure. This time the audience didn't murmur doubt, they simply stood still, watching. Afterwards, a director from a contemporary dance company approached me, pressing her card into my hand. "This is what the future looks like," she murmured. Grants followed, commissions staggered in. I spent months doing what I had pictured since childhood: creating, performing, teaching, and sharing the language of movement, not only to those who already understood, but to those who needed it most: old folks in Queens, public school kids, reticent CEOs at their leadership seminars. Whenever someone asked how I'd started, I'd feel the old ache, the memory of my family squinting at my name scrawled on a program, not believing, not caring, and I'd smile, silently resolving not to let the bitterness grow. I knew I was doing what no one back home had dared to attempt, but I missed them. Even the memory of their laughter strung less as the months thickened with work. It took nearly a decade for me to see Niles, Ohio again. I returned for my sister's baby shower, my hands calloused and cracked from rehearsals, the same leanness in my face now cut with a wiry confidence. My parents greeted me at the airport, their hair grayer, eyes wincing from years squinting at screens too small to see my work. Dad hugged me, his arms awkward but real. "Your mother's been tracking you online," he said, shuffling my bag from one hand to the other. "You're always moving." At the house, my old bedroom had become my sister's craft supply closet. My suitcase barely fit past the yarn bins. My mother peeked in, her cardigan sleeves pushed to her elbows. "You'll help with the folding chairs?" she asked by way of welcome. Through the thin walls, I heard my dad speaking in a low voice to my aunt. "He's in New York, making dances." I helped with everything: setting tables, stringing balloons, lifting party trays, moving with a practiced ease that almost made me forget why I'd left. Old friends dropped by, their hairlines receding but their teasing same as ever. "Can you show us a real New York dance, Marcel?" Someone hooted, laughter bouncing off the paint-faded fence. I grinned. "Only if you dance with me." But I could feel it, the hush polite, the way the little kids still stared like I was a circus act. My uncle cornered me near the cooler and gestured at my jeans dotted with paint. "So what's next, nephew?" Modern art with mashed potatoes. The joke hurt in the way only family jokes do because he didn't see it sting. Later that afternoon, as sunlight trickled through stovetop steam, my mother handed me her phone, screen glowing with an email she'd printed, one of those your child is a semi-finalist for, letters from years ago, faded and worn, folded into her recipe book. You know, we saw your video online, the news thing, the one with the big lights in New York. Your father said you were on television. I nodded, swallowing the urge to ask why they'd never said so. I was. It was a big project. She pressed the paper into my palm. The neighbors are coming tonight. They want to see what you do. Your father set up the old TV. My heart started a slow, peculiar drumbeat, hard against my ribs. What do you mean, see? She gave a hesitant smile. To watch you, we never really understood. Now there's the article and the interview. Maybe you could show us. The house filled by dusk with the familiar scatter of old neighbors and relatives. Out back, my dad's friends arrived in work-smudged overalls, some still holding grease rag wads at their wrists. My sister, radiant and round-bellied, wrangled her kids onto the porch. Even my old track coach stopped by, eyebrows raised with half-remembered pride. The living room, crowded and warm, felt like a church at a strange mass. Dad fiddled with the inputs on the ancient television until, with a surprising sharpness, my voice and moving figure filled the room. There I was, older, sleeker, hair grown longish and wild as wind, surrounded by the art I'd made in light and motion. The video ran, press clippings, dance footage, soundtracked interviews. I stepped onto a giant city stage and watched myself guide dancers, some strong, some limping, all luminous beneath strange blue shadows. The audience back home was silent, kids perched on toes. Adults, normally fluent at making light of things, let quiet settle in like dust. Even my uncle stopped chewing mid-nacho, brow furrowing as the performance rippled over pixelated glow. On screen, my voice, steadier than I remembered, said, I create dances for those who don't believe they can move. I choreographed doubt into possibility. When the video faded, no one spoke at first. The silence was heavy, like after the first flute note in church, sacred or sacred adjacent. I let myself really look at them, my dad straightening in his recliner, my mother hands folded tight around her tea mug. My sister, gentle tears catching on her cheeks. Then the dam broke. My uncle coughed, thick-voiced. Well, would you look at that? Knew he'd do something strange. He looked at me, and for the first time his eyes met mine without the joke. Dad cleared his throat, shambling to his feet. That's real, Marcel. All those people, those lights, they listen to you. I managed a nod, my throat gripped by more emotion than I wanted to admit. They do. You made all that happen. Yes, Dad. He looked down, shook his head, embarrassed smiles flickering. Your mother said you would. I never got it, until now. Mom pressed my arm, her eyes rich with apology and pride tangled together. One of the men from across the street, old Mr. Fowler, who used to fix our mailbox when I was 7, leaned forward, his breath catching. I never thought kids from here could do those kinds of things. I said softly, not as a challenge but as truth, most of us don't try, Mr. Fowler. That doesn't mean we shouldn't. Laughter bubbled uncertain at the edges, but no one made a joke at my expense. For the rest of the night, I answered hesitant questions, signed an autograph for a neighbor's daughter, and found myself suddenly credible in the eyes that had once dismissed me most. My sister hugged me before bed, tears warm on her cheek. I always knew you were meant for more than we understood, she whispered. Later, footsteps padded softly to my door. Dad poked his head in, lamplight wrinkling across his face. I'm proud of you, son. I should have said it before. I swallowed the knot in my throat, found my voice. Thank you, Dad. We stayed in that warmth, listening to the quiet. There was no need for more words, nothing more to prove. That night, rain tapped gently at the old window above my bed, softer than New York ever offered. I let the hush wash through me, filling the spaces where anger used to live. Resolve sat easy in my chest now. The world was changed not by triumph but by return. Above the hum of distant traffic, I could almost hear a city's exhale, a new beginning, somewhere between rhythm and silence.